everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Comic Source. Have a returning creator here today to talk about a book that he's had out for a little while. It's fantastic. Had a chance to read it. My pleasure to welcome Richard Ashley Hamilton back to the show. Richard, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me back, Jace. It's a pleasure to be here again.
Yeah, it's great. I can't wait to talk about the book, Tectiv. But after we finished talking last time, Richard and I were chatting after, and I realized I forgot to give his bio. And you know, sometimes it's interesting, and I know everybody out there in the audience, if I tell you some of the things that Richard's worked on, maybe you'd be like, oh, I love that. I need to go check out, you know, this book that we're talking about. So he's done tons of stuff, screenwriting, as well as, you know, writing these YA novels and some comic work. So you might know him from things like Troll Hunters. He's done a lot of work on How to Train Your Dragon, whether it be the VR or other aspects of that, Captain Underpants, Trolls, Masters of the Universe. So, yeah, he's been around the block, and I can speak from experience, whether you're reading his YA novel Scoop, Volume 1, which he talked about last time he was on, and we'll be talking about Volume 2 later this year, or you're checking out Tectiv, which is the book we're going to check out today. You're in for a treat. Just really fantastic writer. And again, Richard, thanks for taking the time to join me today. Let's kick it off by you giving the elevator pitch. Let everybody know what Tectiv is about.
Oh, Lord. Okay, here we go. So Tectiv is, like Scoop, it's another sort of YA mystery story with a young female protagonist. But where it's different is that Tectiv is set in a far future version of where I live now, Los Angeles. And it's so far in the future, we say it's post-post-apocalyptic. So it's way after every kind of cataclysm you can imagine, and society has been rebuilt. And everyone thinks it's a utopia. It's post-crime, post-racism, post-misogyny, post-everything. And it's like mostly, it's kind of returned to the way Los Angeles used to be before it got overdeveloped. It's a very agrarian society, a lot of farming. And because there's all these ruins from, you know, our old civilization, there's a lot of scavengers. And our main character is a scavenger named Bingo Finder. She collects goods to bring back to her village, but her favorite thing of all to find are books, especially old detective novels. And Bingo is the only literate person in all of LA. It's kind of like her superpower. And she finds this one book early on in our story. It's an old detective novel, but the cover is all tattered. Pieces are missing from it. And so the only thing that's legible from the word detective is just Tectiv in the middle, which is the title of our book. And long story, somewhat shorter, Bingo has a best friend who goes missing under mysterious circumstances. And this blows everyone's mind because there hasn't been a crime in 1,000 years. And as a result, there's no police force, there's no apparatus in place to investigate all this. But, you know, Bingo, who searches for things all the time as a scavenger, she just can't let that go. It's her best friend. She's crazy about her. So Bingo thinks back to those books that she has, and she's like, you know what? I'm going to do like those guys in those stories I love. I'm going to put on a hat and a trench coat, and I'm going to be a detective, and I'm going to walk around LA, and I'm going to solve this mystery. And so we go pretty quickly from weird post-apocalyptic story to kind of dark noir detective story. And this story is just kind of you know, the book is I think a really fun hybrid of those two genres. And in typical noir fashion, the deeper that Bingo digs looking for her friend, the more secrets she unearths, and maybe their society isn't quite such a utopia. Maybe it isn't so post-crime, post-racism, post-everything. And you know, we have a lot of fun with it. We have giant talking coyotes. We have mutants. We have all kinds of goodies that Bingo interacts with. So how was that? It was a long elevator ride, but I think I got through the pitch.
Yeah, no, it was great. And what I love, similar to Scoop, you know, we talked about this when you were on last time, Scoop, with kind of the viewpoint of journalism now, and you know how it's sort of challenging and what have you. And you know, you have some experience with that. That's the other thing about this. Yes, it's YA, everybody, but oh my God, the themes here, it's so layered. There's so much to explore, whether we're talking about, I mean, as we started off before we started recording, you know, Richard mentioned he lives in LA, that we have the horrific fires going there, you know, an apocalypse hitting LA all of a sudden doesn't seem so far-fetched as one might think. So to expose younger readers to things like that, and there's a hopefulness. As you mentioned, post-apocalyptic society has sort of rebuilt itself. But beyond that, themes of inclusion and acceptance, and family and belonging, and self-identity and belief in oneself. There's a lot here. And again, I mean, beyond just the hey, it's great to get young people to read. There's a lot of kind of positive messages in the story as it travels kind of down its dark path with the kind of the noirish feel. So, can you talk a little bit about some of those themes? I mean, I'm sure some of them happened organically, but was there anything particular that you wanted to kind of explore, or a conversation to get started?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I appreciate you saying all that stuff. And, I mean, although this is technically a YA book, and I'm very proud of that distinction, in any story I write to be enjoyed by anyone. And, part of that is kind of like the training that I got working at places like DreamWorks, like you mentioned, which is definitely trying to tell stories. Like How to Train Your Dragon has got to be appealing to kids and to their parents, but also, older brother, older sister in between. And so, I just was trying to apply those lessons to Tectiv. So part of it comes from that. And, part of it also just comes from living in LA in the here and now, and living in our world. And, I think I probably mentioned this last time I was on here. I'm a parent. I've got two sons. They're both teenagers now, which blows my mind. But, they and their friends all live in this world where they're just kind of surrounded by, bad news all the time, and like the world is literally on fire. And, there's political turmoil, not just here, but all around the world. Just climate change is this omnipresent thing, and it's kind of grim. And, so I kind of wanted to take those things and just make them very concrete and make it seem like they all happened, but also to try and find, hopefully, well, hope is the key word there, find a hopeful path forward. And so I thank you for mentioning, hope and all that, because, I think by nature, a pretty upbeat, optimistic guy. And especially when I see like my sons and their whole age group and people like Greta Thunberg, who are so smart and are doing so much to kind of like redeem this very damaged world that they've inherited, that previous generations have have left to them. That fills me with a lot of hope, just seeing how resourceful these kids are. So I kind of wanted to put all that into our main character, Bingo, who is very dogged, but very resourceful. And, I would say while this book definitely sets up the next volume that we're doing, I like to think that it ends on about as hopeful an ending as a noir detective story ever could. So,
Oh yeah, it definitely does. And the other aspect of this is technology. I mean, I'm a technophile. I mean, I work IT for my day job. I love technology. Obviously, I have my own podcast, website, and what have you. And there's an aspect here. Some of the people think, hey, it was technology, and it was hey I, which we'll talk about some of the puns. But then the story kind of turns, and there's this thing that it's not technology itself. You can point the finger at this tool or that tool or whatever, but in the end they're tools, and it's how they're used. And anything can be abused, and what's the saying, everything in moderation, right? Don't go overboard on any one thing too much. But this idea of technology, it can bring us together, but it can also isolate us. Is that a concept that you find interesting?
yes, interesting and also terrifying, because unlike you, I'm more of a technophobe. But look, I'm a writer and a screenwriter and all that stuff, and so AI is very much on everyone's minds.
Oh yeah.
And that actually in all aspects of that industry, and is a big point of contention in those strikes from, I guess, 2 years ago now. And so it presents an existential threat, but at the same time, my wife and I have a big anniversary coming up, and we're planning a trip. And she was showing me on our iPhone how, everyone else knows this, but this was like magic to me, how in the camera app you can translate text, foreign language into English. And like what amazing tools, like to bring the world together, to bring us into the world. So even for like a fuddy-duddy like me, I'm like, this is an amazing tool. And yes, it all depends on how it's employed by people. And I think like that's kind of the ultimate thing that's at stake in Tectiv is like, we do have an answer for what this great cataclysm was, and there's sort of all these urban legends within our story about it was technology, it was mutants, it was this or that. And without giving anything away, kind of the main question is like, well, what was humanity's role in all that? What was humanity's role leading up to the destruction, during the destruction, immediately following that in the aftermath? And now, like with the benefit of hindsight, what have we learned? Can we learn? Can we improve from that? So those things, are very much, front of mind when we were making Tectiv.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to me. I mean, I'm so curious. I would love, like, I was talking about immortality recently on an episode, and I was like, yeah, it would be great to live forever, only because, not because I'm of the hubris and I think I deserve it or what have you. I'm just so curious what the world will look like in 500 years. And it very well be that we'll look back and think, man, what were we thinking back then? Because I have a foot in both worlds, doing this podcast and having so many friends that are creatives. AI is awful. I don't want it to take anybody's job as a writer, certainly not as an artist and what have you. And to me, the quality of the work is nowhere near. But then I have my other foot, with developers that are writing code and whatever, and their AI it's so helpful and it saves so much time or whatever. So I can see both sides. And at the end of the day, like you said, it's a tool. And people have to use it the right way. So I guess time will tell, but it might be a time after you and I are long gone. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I always say like that if I could have one superpower, it would just be time travel. I don't know that I want to live forever, but I would definitely love to see like the far future.
Right.
And there's many spots in the past I'd want to go back to and check that out. But yeah, I think it comes down to moderation, as you said. And unfortunately, our species is not famously great with moderation, and even Bingo has some problems with moderation that we kind of start to bring up in this book, and we're definitely going to address in the next one. So yeah, it's all grist for the mill, and I think that the trick is trying to present it in a way where it doesn't feel like we're speechifying or lecturing or too didactic, but that it's all kind of couched in it's hopefully a very fun and entertaining comic.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned fun because that was kind of the next point. Yeah, some of these are big themes, but I think for especially younger readers kind of on the younger end, a lot of that might kind of go over their head. They don't have the life experience, but certainly the humor is there. Whether it's the puns, I mentioned "Hey I," and the fact that it's L.A. It's kind of like L.A. like all one word, like ELLAY is
Right.
where they live. And even visually, which we'll talk about the artist in a little while, landmarks like the Hollywood sign and what have you. But in terms of those puns and being able to like look back, I love the line about the 405 freeway. Did those just come naturally to you as you were writing it? They would kind of pop in your head, or maybe on subsequent rewrites. Talk a little bit about it, injecting the humor and the puns and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't know what it says about me, but most of those puns came way too easily. I'm definitely a dad joke kind of guy. So there's that in there. But, like books and language and the fact that Bingo is the only literate person, like all that is very much in play in the story. And so it became kind of a fun game, for us to start to make that manifest in the art and also in the lettering. Like a lot of our chapter breaks are misspelled, like part 1 is part WON.
Right.
Part 2 is part TOO, stuff like that. So, it some of it is just to kind of make us laugh, but also is a little bit of a commentary on the fact that nobody else in Bingo's world can like string together a sentence, and some of that is, I'm kind of my oldest son, when he like sends me texts, they're incomplete sentences. They have punctuation and good grammar, and I'm very happy as a writer. My younger boy, we're still working on his. He's getting better, but it's like he's not alone. I think most people now just use this shorthand, and that as a guy who's dedicated most of my life to the written word, that kind of freaks me out. That all these rules and kind of the nuance of language is maybe getting lost in the shuffle. So it was a little bit of a commentary on that too.
Man, I am the same way. I send a text if I see that I misspelled a word. I'll send the word spelled correctly again with like a little asterisk. And my wife's like, "I know what you meant. Why do you have to do that?" I'm like, It just needs to be correct. And then my
It's not
daughter,
for you, it's for me.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. My daughter, she's sending me, 2 letters like RN, right now. And I'm like, you can't, like, and then nothing's ever capitalized, no punctuation.
Yeah, it drives me
So
nuts.
it drives me nuts too. Well, we mentioned the art before.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about your collaboration with Marco Matrone, who handles the art. And I want to get into kind of the design, like how you guys design the world and the look.
Sure. Well, I mean, I could talk about Marco all day. I keep referring to him as my creative brother from an Italian mother. We've never met, but this is actually the second book we've done together. We met first. We did a book through Aftershock Comics, had a young readers line called Seismic Press, and we did a book there called Fear Book Club a couple years ago that I think sort of went under most people's radar. But our editors on that book were Mike Martz and Christina Harrington. And wouldn't you know it, they're both at Mad Cave and Maverick now, and they're the editors on Tectiv. And so we kind of got the band back together, but they had introduced me to Marco on Fear Book Club, and Dave Sharp actually lettered Fear Book Club and was also lettered Tectiv and made our beautiful logo that you see there. And it's amazing. Like I said, Marco and I have never met in person. We've done Zooms and we'd like send each other messages on WhatsApp and stuff, but I'm just always floored by how universal comics are as a language.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just very, very lucky that, I write these scripts. I try and put in as much photo reference, especially for things that are like very unique to LA, like some of the landmarks that we kind of put a detective twist on. Marco may not be as familiar with them as I am. They're pretty much in my backyard. So I send him that stuff, but he's really, he does all the art. He pencils, inks, and colors. He has a real painterly approach. He's actually like a phenomenal just painter. If you ever check out his Instagram, and he, we kind of knew there were a couple of challenges going into Tectiv. One is it's post-apocalyptic. I love post-apocalyptic stories, but there are just so many of them out there now, so many famous ones. So how can you do one that still reads as post-apocalyptic but has more of a distinctive identity to it? So, we kind of went away from something that looked more deserty, like a Mad Max kind of thing, or even anything that's sort of too overdeveloped as a cityscape, like, kind of the Blade Runner look, and went for something that was very green, very lush. It's so far in the future, and there's so much less humanity that climate change is kind of gone, and the climate has changed once again. And so now it's very rainy in LA. So you've got a lot of plants reclaiming, all the ruins. And it also just works from a noir standpoint because, we have all those classic images in our mind of a PI in a trench coat, and they're walking down the rain-slicked streets of Los Angeles. And so that it gives us a little bit of play with that. And, we also knew that noir, by very definition is dark. It's black and bleak. And we wanted some color to kind of soften it up to make it more appealing to not just a young audience, but any audience. But, we're specifically cognizant of the fact that for a lot of our younger readers, they may not have encountered noir fiction before in movies or books or whatever. So this could be kind of their first noir story, and we wanted it to be kind of a nice way to dip your toe into it. And so, I flip through this book all the time just to look at Marco's art because it's so lush. The colors are so beautiful. And I think his acting is amazing too. Like with noir and with mysteries, so much of the storytelling hinges on a character reacting to something or them perceiving it, or we have to see their brain actually thinking as they're piecing together the clues. And Marco just nailed it.
Yeah, it is interesting because I mentioned this right on the top about it being kind of about this identity, finding self identity. Yes, they're kind of young adults, maybe teenagers. The main character Bingo, her friend Roper. But it is a different society, so maybe it's not the same kind of pressures or expectations. But there's still that identity that I think a lot of younger readers can identify with of trying to find who you are, and that's what's so great when Bingo decides, hey, I'm going to be a detective. I'm going to take this identity. Yeah, you can throw on the trench coat and the hat, but even to the point, and I love that you did this, of her saying, well, I need to self-narrate, and it needs to be like in a certain tense. And Marco does, he captures that feel so well, but then that word that you used before is still there, even though things get a little dark. It still has this hopefulness to it the entire time. That's an incredible balance and very hard to do.
Well, thank you, and really all credit goes to Marco, and I'd say also to Christina, our editor, because she's was a pretty good barometer for when things were getting too dark or too light. And yeah, like when Bingo first becomes a detective, it's kind of like a kid playing dress up. Like she's having fun with
Right.
it. She
Yep.
starts using the slang and just feels cool. But, like stuff starts to get pretty real pretty quickly. And she definitely pays a couple of pretty big costs in the story. So, we wanted to front load it with like the fun, like like in a animated movie, there's usually a sequence in the beginning where it's like, you know, Hiccup riding on Toothless, and it's just the unbridled joy of like your first flight on a dragon, right? And so we kind of wanted the same thing with Bingo being a detective, but then after a certain point, you get a little closer to the end of Act Two, and things take a twist, and it becomes more dramatic. And we wanted our audience to hang in there for those turns, and we felt the best way to do that was to kind of like sweeten the deal up front, hook them, and then hopefully they go with us the rest of the way.
Yeah, and like you said, it ends on as hopeful a note as a noir story can. And obviously with not everything is tied up. There's some possibilities of a sequel. So this came out on December 10th, everybody. So it's available out there. You can order it through your comic shop. You can probably find it at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, that kind of thing. But I wonder because it has been out for a little while. What's the reception been like, Richard? Have you had a chance to hear from anybody or see reviews, that sort of thing?
Yeah, the reviews have been very positive. I think they're probably the most positive of anything I've written so far. So I'm very gratified for that. We got a starred review in Kirkus, Publishers Weekly really loved it. If you're kind of like a regular Wednesday warrior at a comic shop like me, that might not mean much, but it'd sort of be like being on Wizard's top 10 list,
Mm-hmm.
like
Yep.
in the world of like YA publishing and kids books. Those kind of reviews are really meaningful, and that's got it on a lot of people's radar. And I think it's, from a sales standpoint, I don't know yet. I think it's still a little too early to tell. But so far the reviews have been overwhelmingly good, and it's especially gratifying to see everyone really noticing and celebrating Marco's art. He's, just done an incredible job on this, and I'm going to cling on to his coattails as long as he will allow.
Well, I loved Scoop, so I knew I was gonna pick this up, just based on the conversation the great conversation we had about Scoop, and I knew this was coming. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have to check it out. And I enjoyed it just as much as Scoop, but there's other than the fact that they both kind of star young women here as the protagonists, they're so different. I was really surprised by the difference in tone. Both really enjoyable. But yeah, so everybody, if you're out there and some of these properties that we mentioned, they're things that you love, like I was saying earlier that Richard's worked on, How to Train Your Dragon or Troll Hunters or Masters Universe, whatever. You have some variety here. You can go pick up Scoop. You can go pick up Tectiv. You can see how much you enjoy them. So thanks so much, Richard, for joining me. Let's finish on this note as we're winding down here. Through the development of this story, and hopefully there will be a sequel. Certainly, the ending leaves an opening for that. But while you were writing this chunk of the story, let's say, was there anything that changed as you were going along? Anything that kind of surprised you? A twist or a turn or a plot point, or maybe it was a kind of a major plot point. Anything that kind of jumped up and like, oh, because as I know, stories often start telling themselves, and characters start telling the writer where they're going. So, were there any surprises here?
Totally. I was just as surprised as Bingo is going through this thing, and had been working on this story for a very long time, many iterations of it, and certain things are remain the same. But it was characters, a lot of secondary characters coming in that at first were sort of meant to be not throwaway characters because I one of the world building lessons I learned, from Dean DeBlois, who wrote and directed the How to Train Your Dragon movies and is actually now doing the live action one, was like all the world building should come from character and everything should just be very specific. So we didn't want to just have like background extras in the scenes. We wanted to make them, mutants or somebody that would look like they have a specific function in a post-apocalyptic society. And so there's one character in particular who is a neighbor of Bingo's when she starts to kind of puts out her own shingle and gets an office as a PI. And this guy's name is Palooka. And in the beginning, he was just sort of meant to be, kind of like he'd have a couple lines and that'd be it. And when Marco's sketches came in, Christina and I were just like, this guy's awesome. and so I just like wanted to do more stuff with him. And the same goes, I don't want to give any spoilers for the folks who haven't read this yet. So there are definitely other characters and there are other twists that came later on. There's actually something that happens to Bingo's home, which was sort of a new thing and does relate to the wildfires. Can I actually make a very quick plug?
Oh yeah, 100%.
So there is going to be a Tectiv Volume 2. We're working on that as soon as Marco and I are done with another project that we're doing for part of the Mad Cave family. But more immediately, maybe you saw Mad Cave has announced they're doing a benefit book for the victims of the LA wildfires. And I spoke to Marco and I spoke to Dave, and they're being very kind, and we're doing a very small 3-page story that's going to go in this book, and it's a detective story, and it has to do with a sort of a wildfire that Bingo experiences in Volume 1 and kind of what the fallout is of that. And I'm very proud of Mad Cave doing this book. All the proceeds go to charity. We're all working on spec, but really I'm so incredibly proud and thankful to Dave and especially Marco, because it takes that poor guy a hell of a lot longer to draw 3 pages than it takes me to write them.
Right.
So I'm super proud of that. And I think that'll be out by some point in March. And there's also a whole lot of other really beautiful pieces and pinups and other contributions from all these talented folks who work with Mad Cave. There's like some really big name people and some people that I hadn't yet heard of, but I'm so floored by their talent and I want to work with them. And I just really strongly encourage anyone to, just drop a couple of bucks, pick up the book. You won't be disappointed. And, it's all going to a very worthy cause.
Yeah, 100%. And I know, near and dear to you, we were talking, before we started, how on the nose Tectiv is in terms of, apocalypse hitting LA,
oh, yeah.
you living there. And I'm glad you're safe, but we both know people, I'm sure you know a lot more than I, that have lost everything. So I'll put a link, everybody, to kind of the press release that Mad Cave put out about that book. I echo Richard's sentiments. Drop a couple bucks, help everybody out. You'll get a great comic with, gorgeous art and awesome stories. So, yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Richard.
Thank you.
Yeah, anything else that you want to share with our audience as we're winding down here? Maybe let them know where they can follow your work online.
Yeah, sure. As discussed, I'm terrible with technology, so I don't have the biggest social footprint. But you can find me on Instagram at my full dorky name at Richard Ashley Hamilton. That the middle name part's important. It's the same thing on Facebook at Richard Ashley Hamilton. I'm on. Well, I have an X account. I wouldn't say I'm on it all that much, but it's at Regards Richard. But really, Mad Cave and Maverick are pretty awesome about posting things online. So, just look for their announcements. We have Scoop Volume 2 came out in the last fall. Volume 3 is going to come out in, I believe, March or April, and then Volume 4 is going to come out by the end of this year. And so we're still really hard at work on that. But Pablo Andres, our artist, is doing unbelievable work on Volume 4 right now, and Simon Robbins is coloring the hell out of it, and Dave Lamphere is really lettering it. And Volume 3 is particularly cool because it's sort of the first volume of Scoop where the whole team is starting together on page one, panel one. So Pablo and Simon and Dave are all they have all kind of figured out how to gel and work with each other now. And so if people have checked out the other two books, they're going to love volume three. And if you haven't checked out Scoops one or two, you can still pick up volume three as a jumping on point. And I promise you're going to be blown away by the artwork.
Yeah,
Story, okay, too, but artwork's amazing.
Yeah, I can't wait for it. I'm super excited, and great to hear that it's a jumping on point. But I'll say this, everybody: you owe it to yourself to read volumes 1 and 2, and you have a little bit of time. Now's the time. Go out, pick up Scoop volume 1 and 2, and Tectiv while you're at it. You get a little discount by buying in bulk, perhaps, and you'll get a chance to be caught up on Scoop before volume 3 drops. But again, Richard, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for taking the time. Just love the book, and look forward to more Tectiv in the future as well.
Oh, well, likewise, Jace. Thank you very much, and I hope you have me back. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, oh, definitely. We'll definitely have you back to talk Scoop 3 after it's been out for a little while.
Right on. Thanks.
I'll put a link to Richard's Instagram in the show notes as well, along with that link to the benefit book for the LA fire victims in the show notes, everybody. So if you're having trouble finding them, you can go there. So on the behalf of Richard and myself, we want to thank everybody for joining us, whether you're checking us out on our YouTube channel or the audio-only feed. We really appreciate everybody taking the time, and we'll talk to you on the next one.